Hey y'all, it is Nikki here, Cloudwalker, aspiring fantasy writer, and daughter of the true Aslan. And it has been a while. Seriously, I haven't posted since before I got my super long haircut in the fall, hence the mane that I've got going on right now. Shout out quickly to my fictional hair inspirations, Cress Darnell from the Lunar Chronicles, and most of all, Stella Malone from Jonas, the best Disney Channel show of all time. The Jonas Brothers may disagree with me on that, but to that I say they are entitled to their incorrect opinion. I know I haven't posted a writing update in a while, but that doesn't mean I haven't been writing. All this winter, I've pretty much been working on polishing my NaNoWriMo 2020 project, getting it ready for querying. And right now, I am smack dab in the middle of the sequel to that project, which is a YA contemporary that, as of right now, doesn't have a name, which is kind of bothering me, but I feel like it's one of those projects that I need to get to the end of before the perfect title will present itself. And since you can never have enough writing projects on the go at once, I've also been working on world building and preparing for rewrites for my ongoing epic fantasy series. As some of you may know, I hybrid published an early draft of the first book while I was in high school, since kind of shelved the project to work on other things and have been chipping away at it between other manuscripts in the hope of one day revisiting it and completing and publishing the entire series. That is the project that I want to talk to you guys about because it was during the world building and writing process for that project that I came across an issue I'd been tripping over without even knowing that I was tripping over it, and that is the issue of the fantastical versus the familiar. Probably don't need to define the fantastical. It pretty much covers all those fantastic and mythical elements of a story that we don't have in our world, sadly. Think dragons, non-humans like elves or dwarves, supernatural abilities, other worlds, other planets, you get the picture. But then the familiar, on the other hand, is all those things that we as the reader can relate to even without belonging to that world. It might be a human experience like falling in love or loyalty to family, or it might be more literal things like a heartbeat and eyes and feet and hands. Granted, the feet might be abnormally large and the eyes might glow yellow and have wolf night vision, but we can relate to heartbeats and eyes and hands and feet and family and relationship drama. Those things make sense to us. Take the Lunar Chronicles. If you read YA fantasy, you're probably familiar with that series by Marissa Meyer. The main character is a cyborg. 76% or so of her is not human. She has wires in her brain along with a lie detector. She can't cry, and she may or may not have ties to a colony of maniac, mind-controlling moon people. But she has a great sense of sarcasm, she's a great mechanic, she's a little socially awkward, and she rocks a messy ponytail, and those are all things that we get, we understand. Another character in that series falls in love with a wolf-man hybrid on a quest to rescue her grandmother from, again, the psychotic moon people. But before you give up on her because, whoa, that's weird, she also farms tomatoes and wears jeans and a ratty hoodie and loves the lemon cake that her grandmother makes for her on her birthday. Familiar. Fantasy pretty much always has some sort of a balance of both. You need the dragons and the sword fights and the fantastical elements, or if it's a sci-fi, the spaceships and laser blasters to make it fantastical. But then you also need those familiar parts that the reader will be able to connect with and say, okay, like, I get that, I get you, and now I want to read the story to find out what's going to happen to you because we are on the same page in this way. That's actually something that I learned from Thomas Umstattd Jr., the host of the Christian Publishing Show, and it was at the Realmmakers Writers Conference last year. Someone was proposing this really cool sci-fi idea where the main character was like some kind of alien, and he was just saying, as far as I can remember, that it's okay to have a non-human main character, but you don't want them to be so out there that the reader can't connect with them or feels kind of weirded out by how different we are. Even anatomically, like they should be humanoid enough that the reader feels like, okay, like we're kind of the same. Even if we're different, we're kind of the same. Ultimately, you want the reader to connect with your main character. You want them to connect with your protagonist so that they can then connect with your story through the protagonist. So again, familiarity, super important, but it can also become a trap. You can get stuck there. And that's the point I'm trying to get to because that is what happened to me. When I was first starting my epic fantasy story, it was kind of one of my first real novel projects. My main reference point for fantasy was Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, which, I mean, big surprise. It's probably a reference point for a ton of authors. The thing with The Lord of the Rings is that it checks all the fantasy boxes, but I would kind of put it more on the like familiar end of the spectrum. Yes, it has dragons, the magical rings, and elements of fantasy, but I mean, the landscape looks pretty much like ours. The clothing is pretty standard medieval clothing. They eat strawberries and cream and the same vegetables that we eat, and the world itself pretty much looks like how we imagine our own medieval period of history looking, which is fine. But compare that to, say, Brandon Sanderson's latest Stormlight novel, The Rhythm of War, where things are totally different. People don't wear dresses, they wear havas, and they have their left hand hidden for modesty reasons. Why? Why not? They don't ride horses, they ride rhyshadeums and pull carts with giant crab-like choles. And they don't smoke pipes, they rub moss between their fingers. Not to mention the entire Spren realm, which is like a whole other dimension where gravity doesn't even work the way it should. It's like all those bones of our world that Tolkien keeps intact in his writing, Sanderson switches out for something different. And that's what makes his world so much more kind of wacky, out there, while still being very grounded in very human characters and human experiences. I give credit to Brandon Sanderson for opening my eyes to all the ways in which I had written myself into a box. I didn't even know that I was allowed to manipulate the anatomy of my humanoid characters. Like, I didn't know that they could have a blue tinge to their skin or, you know, different textures of fingernails. I didn't know that I could invent fashion and articles of clothing for these people that don't exist in our world. I didn't even think of those things. I mean, my main character literally lived in the clouds, and I didn't even think to make animals that could also live in the clouds. Because ironically, I was so grounded in this world that I ended up with a race of people that lives in the sky, but no animals can live there and nothing can grow there because it's the sky. What? Like, why not? Who says? Those things didn't even cross my mind. I was writing fantasy, but it was like this tame, like, safe in the box fantasy because I didn't know that I was allowed to recreate some of those bones that you just take for granted in the world around us. Just think about the creativity of God in creating our world. He didn't have a reference point. He wasn't looking at Tolkien for permission to put this creature here or decide what this person is allowed to do and what this person isn't and what should go where. He had the epitome of creative license, and he gives us a bit of that creativity so that we can also make worlds that glorify him as writers. So I hope you see the point that I'm trying to make here. Familiarity is important, but it can become a tiny box that can keep a world small if we're not aware of it. If that's what you're going for, if you want a world and a story that airs more on the side of Lord of the Rings than, say, Rhythm of War, like, for example, Robert Jordan's The Eye of the World has very much that feel. That is awesome. Like, if that is what you're going for, it's amazing. I love stories like that. I mean, you're in great company because Tolkien and like so many people are into stories like that. So you go, I cannot wait to read it. But for me personally, that wasn't an intentional choice. I just didn't know that I was allowed to test those boundaries. I kind of needed to have my eyes open to the possibilities of world building, the things that I was allowed to manipulate or twist or put this thing over here and that thing over there and flip this on its head. I needed to see that to understand that I wasn't bound by the laws of this world, that I could literally make up my own rules. And that was really eye-opening for me, and I think it's really going to help me make my future worlds as creative and rich and unique to me as possible. So I hope you enjoyed this video and that it made sense to you, that maybe you had your eyes opened a bit too if you felt like you were in a box like me while you were writing fantasy. I'm so glad that you guys came by and watched. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, all those amazing things if you feel so compelled, and I hope to see you guys soon.